you did not find this message. This message found you. And if you have learned anything about the way heaven moves, you already know that nothing reaching the right person at the right moment ever arrives by accident. There is a force older than time itself that governs the pathways of divine information. And right now, in this exact second, that force has aimed something directly at your life. The question is not whether you are ready. The question is whether you will allow yourself to receive what has already been released on your behalf. Because the door that is about to open on June 11 is not the door that will wait forever. And the cost of staying asleep, beloved chosen one, is far greater than you have allowed yourself to calculate. Let us talk honestly about what it means to stay asleep. Not the sleep of the body, but the sleep of the spirit. The kind of sleep that keeps a person moving through their days without truly inhabiting them. The kind that lets weeks turn into months and months turn into years, while a quiet voice inside keeps whispering that something is supposed to shift, something is supposed to change, something greater is supposed to break through. You have heard that voice. You have felt that pull. You have stood at the edge of something enormous and then stepped back because the timing did not feel right, because the circumstances were not perfect, because some part of you was still negotiating with fear. And so the cycle repeated. The same patterns returned. The same walls appeared. The same exhaustion settled back in like an old, unwelcome guest who somehow always knows where you live. That is the cost of staying asleep. Not a single dramatic loss, but a slow erosion. A quiet accumulation of unlived moments. A version of yourself standing just beyond the fog of delay, waiting for the you that is listening right now to finally say enough. Enough of the repeating. Enough of the returning to the same place. Enough of knowing, on some level deeper than thought, that you were built for more than this. And yet allowing the ordinary rhythm of dulled life to convince you that maybe more is not for you. But here is what heaven wants you to understand today. The cycle does not break itself. Patterns do not dissolve simply because you are tired of them. Spiritual obedience is the mechanism through which God releases what He has already prepared. And every time obedience is delayed, the breakthrough that belongs to you sits waiting, fully assembled, fully financed, fully authorized, and yet unreachable, because the one it was designed for has not yet stepped forward to claim it. You were not put on this earth to endlessly rehearse pain. You were not designed to carry weight that leaves you bent, to fight battles that circle back every season, to wake up in the dark hours of the morning with a chest full of questions that no one around you seems to be asking. That particular kind of ache, the one that does not fit neatly into a conversation, the one that you have learned to hide behind functionality and routine, that ache is not evidence of your brokenness. It is evidence of your assignment, because ordinary people do not carry the kind of weight you have been carrying. Ordinary people do not feel the depth of longing that you feel. Ordinary people do not sense the gap between what is and what is supposed to be with the kind of precision that keeps you up at night. That sensitivity, that awareness, that holy discomfort, it is the fingerprint of the chosen. And yet the enemy has used that very sensitivity against you. He has taken what was designed to be a compass and turned it into a source of confusion. He has taken your awareness of your destiny and twisted it into anxiety about your delay. He has made you question whether the call you felt was real, whether the promise was truly for you, whether you misheard or imagined something that was never actually spoken over your life. And so you have walked in circles, not because you lack faith entirely, but because the weight of unanswered questions has made forward movement feel dangerous. And every time you almost stepped through a door, something pulled you back, not God, not your destiny. Fear, familiarity, the gravitational pull of a life that is known, even if it is insufficient. But today is different, not because of a feeling, not because the circumstances have finally aligned in the way you have been waiting for them to. Today is different because heaven has sent a word ahead of a date. June 11 is not an ordinary day on the calendar. It is a divine appointment that has been set since before you understood what appointments with God could look like. It is a convergence point, a place where your accumulated endurance meets the released acceleration, where everything you have survived long enough to be standing here today is counted not as wasted time, but as qualification, where the pain that has followed you like a shadow is finally going to encounter a light is strong enough to dissolve it permanently. But you must be awake to walk through an open door. You cannot stumble through a prophetic threshold, still half asleep in the language of your old cycles. This is the moment when spiritual obedience is not optional, not because God will punish you for hesitation, but because delay has a price you can no longer afford. Every season you remain in the pattern is another season your assignment goes undone. Every month the chosen one stays hidden is another month the people who need what only you carry are left without it. The cost of your staying asleep is never only paid by you. It is paid by everyone your awakened life was supposed to touch. So hear this clearly. Heaven is not whispering to you anymore. Heaven is speaking at full volume through every restless night, every inexplicable tear, every moment when you felt completely alone in a room full of people, every near miss that somehow did not destroy you, even though it should have, every time you crawled back to your feet when no one was watching. All of it has been preparation. All of it has been counting. And now the preparation meets its purpose. Now the endurance meets its reward. Now the chosen one, you, steps into the fullness of what was written over your life before a single day of your suffering began. The prophet Isaiah recorded what the Lord spoke to those who were weary and waiting, and these words were not written for a distant generation. They were written for you right now, in this moment. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. That is your word for this season. Not the waiting of passivity, but the waiting of alignment. The waiting of the chosen one who refuses to move in the wrong direction just because standing still has become uncomfortable. You have been waiting, and your waiting has not been wasted. It has been building something in you that ordinary circumstances could never have built. It has been forging a character that is now strong enough to carry the weight of what June 11 is about to place in your hands. So let the repeating cycles hear your declaration today. Let the patterns of the past feel the shift that is happening in your spirit right now. Let every force that has kept you circling the same mountain receive the signal that the circling is finished. You are not going around again. You are going through, and you are going through into something that has your name on it, something that has been held in trust by heaven itself, waiting for the moment when the chosen one was ready, not just to receive the blessing, but to carry the responsibility that comes with it. If you feel this word landing in a place inside you that you did not know was open, if something is stirring that has been quiet for too long, if this message is reaching a part of you that the noise of daily life has kept buried, then do not let this moment pass in silence. Type the number 888 in the comments right now, not as a ritual, not as a formula, but as a declaration, as a signal to heaven and to yourself that you are awake, that you are present, that you are the chosen one who has decided, on this day, that the cycle ends here and the door opens now. Because, beloved, the pain has not come to stay. It has come to qualify you. And June 11 is the date heaven has chosen to prove it. There is a name recorded in Scripture that most people walk past without stopping. It sits quietly in the middle of a long genealogy, surrounded by names that mean nothing to the average reader, buried in a list that most people skip entirely because it feels like inventory rather than revelation. But heaven does not bury things without purpose. Heaven hides treasure in plain sight, and the ones who are chosen are the ones who slow down long enough to notice what everyone else overlooked. The name is Jabez, and if you have never heard his story told the way it deserves to be told, then understand that what you are about to receive is not coincidence. It is a mirror. It is your story told in ancient language, preserved across thousands of years, waiting for this exact moment when someone who was born into pain needed to see proof that pain is never the final chapter. Jabez was born into a world that named him before he had a chance to introduce himself. His mother, in the rawness of her labor, in the weight of whatever she had endured to bring him into the world, looked at her newborn son and gave him a name that meant sorrow. She named him Pain. She named him the one who causes grief. Not because she did not love him, but because the circumstances of his arrival were so saturated with suffering that the only language available to her was the language of what she had just survived. And so, from his very first breath, Jabez carried a label. Before he could speak, before he could walk, before he could form a single thought about who he was or what he was capable of, the world had already written a verdict over his life and pressed it into the syllables of his name. You know what that feels like. Not necessarily in the literal sense of a name given at birth, but in the way the world has labeled you. In the way certain experiences have written words over your identity that you did not choose and did not deserve. In the way people who were supposed to see your potential saw only your problems. In the way circumstances that were never your fault became the lens through which you were defined. You have been handed names that were not yours to carry. Names like failure. Names like forgotten. Names like too broken to be fixed, too damaged to be used, too far behind to ever catch up. And like Jabez, you have spent years walking through a world that greeted you with the weight of a verdict that was never supposed to be permanent. But here is what the scripture reveals about Jabez that changes everything. It says that he was more honorable than his brothers. In the middle of a genealogy that does not slow down for anyone else, God stops the record and inserts that single declaration, more honorable, which means that the name given to him at birth, the label pressed into him by painful circumstances, never actually became his identity. It tried. It had every environmental advantage. It had the weight of his origin story behind it. It had the momentum of a mother's tears and a difficult beginning. And yet something in Jabez refused to let the verdict of his past become the definition of his future. Something in him, the same something that is in you right now, remained honorable in the face of a name that said he should not be. And then Jabez prayed, not a long prayer, not an elaborate theological argument with heaven, not a years-long petition campaign filled with perfect language and flawless doctrine. He prayed one prayer, a single, honest, audacious request directed at the God who he somehow knew was bigger than the name he had been given. He said, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, that your hand would be with me, and that you would keep me from evil so that I may not cause pain." And the scripture closes that moment with 4 of the most powerful words in the entire passage, and God granted it. That is the whole story. A man born into pain, named by pain, surrounded by the expectation of pain, opens his mouth in one moment of radical spiritual audacity and asks God to rewrite the narrative. And God does it. Not eventually, not after a long waiting period designed to test his patience. The text does not say God considered it, or God partially granted it, or God told him to come back next season. It says God granted it. Present tense, immediate, complete. The boundary of his life expanded. The territory of his influence grew. The hand of divine protection came to rest on the man whose very name had once announced limitation. This is what June 11 carries for you. Not a maybe, not a perhaps, not a conditional promise wrapped in so many qualifications that you cannot find the actual gift inside the packaging. June 11 is a Jabez moment for the chosen one who has been walking under the weight of a name that was never theirs to carry. It is the day when the prayer you have been afraid to pray too boldly, the request you have been softening so as not to seem presumptuous, the desire you have been apologizing for, even as you expressed it, finally meets a heaven that is ready to say granted, fully, completely, without reservation. Because chosen ones are not chosen for comfortable, small, carefully managed lives. They are chosen for expanded territory. They are chosen for influence that reaches beyond what their natural circumstances would ever have allowed. They are chosen for impact that makes the story of their origin seem impossible when placed next to the reality of their destination. But the expansion requires the prayer. The territory does not enlarge itself simply because the chosen one deserves it. Jabez had to open his mouth. He had to direct his faith toward a specific request. He had to stand in the full awareness of his painful name and decide that the God who made him was greater than the circumstances that named him. You have been standing at the edge of that prayer for a long time. You have felt it forming inside you in the quiet moments, in the spaces between the noise of daily life, in the late hours when nothing around you is competing for your attention, and the real conversation between your spirit and your Creator is finally allowed to surface. That prayer is not arrogance. That prayer is not presumption. That prayer is the language of the chosen one who understands that smallness was never the plan, that limitation was always the lie, and that the God who formed them before the foundation of the world did not do, who would spend their entire life circling the same mountain of pain without ever being permitted to cross into the territory that was promised. Jabez did not let his name become his nature, and you are not going to let your pain become your permanent address. That is the declaration that heaven is waiting to hear from your lips in this season, not the careful, hedged, overly qualified version, the full, bold, unashamed version, the one that sounds almost too big for the room you are currently standing in, the one that, when you say it out loud, part of you wants to take it back because it feels like too much to ask for. That is exactly the version God is waiting to grant. Because the story of Jabez is not in Scripture to inspire casual admiration. It is not there to make readers feel warm feelings about an ancient man who had a hard life, and then things got a little better. It is there as a template. It is there as an invitation. It is there as proof, pressed into the permanent record of God's own word, that the circumstances of your beginning are not the ceiling of your life, that a name given in pain can be lived past, that the territory of a chosen one is always larger than the starting conditions would suggest. That one prayer, offered with genuine faith and radical honesty, is enough to shift the entire landscape of a life. And what Jabez asked for, you are allowed to ask for too. Enlarge my territory. Let your hand be with me. Keep me from the patterns that have caused harm. Move me beyond the name I was given, into the name you have written over me in eternity. That is not an arrogant prayer. That is the prayer of someone who has decided to believe that what God says about them is more authoritative than what their pain has said about them. That is the prayer of the chosen one who has finally grown tired of living inside a story that was written by suffering instead of by heaven. 1 Chronicles chapter 4 verse 10 records it this way. And Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my coast, and that your hand might be with me, and that you would keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me." And God granted him that which he requested. Read that again slowly. God granted him that which he requested, not a portion, not a modified version, not a blessing with so many conditions attached that the original request was barely recognizable by the time it arrived. God granted him that which he requested, and the same God who granted it to a man born into pain, named by grief, surrounded by the expectation of limitation, is the same God who is listening to you right now. The same God who stopped the entire genealogical record of an ancient nation to note that one man was more honorable than his circumstances suggested. That same God has stopped to notice you. That same God has seen every night you endured without explanation. That same God has been watching you remain honorable in the face of everything that tried to define you by your worst moments and your most painful chapters. June 11 is not a date on a secular calendar. It is a Jabez threshold. It is the point where the pain that named you loses its authority over the territory that was always meant to be yours. It is where your one honest, bold, unashamed prayer meets the God who has been waiting for you to ask without apology. And when you cross that threshold, beloved chosen one, the record will show, in the permanent archive of heaven, that the one who was named by pain became the one whose territory could not be contained by it. The expansion is already authorized. The hand of God is already extended. The only remaining element is the prayer of the one who is chosen, offered without shrinking, directed at a God who has never once failed to grant what was asked in faith by the ones he marked before the world began. Your Jabez moment is here. Do not whisper it. Do not soften it. Do not wait until you feel worthy enough to ask boldly. You are already worthy. You were made worthy before the pain arrived, and June 11 is the day heaven has set aside to prove it. There is something that has been true about you for your entire life that no one ever gave you the language to describe. You have felt it in the moments when a solution appeared in your mind before you had fully formed the question. You have felt it in the way you sometimes know things without being able to explain how you know them. The way a sense of direction rises in you from somewhere deeper than logic. The way creativity moves through you in waves that feel less like something you produced and more like something you received. You have dismissed it. You have second-guessed it. You have allowed the noise of a world that rewards only what can be measured and verified to talk you out of trusting what cannot be easily explained. But what you have been experiencing your entire life is not imagination. It is not coincidence. It is not a personality quirk or an overactive mind. It is a frequency, and it is the frequency of the chosen. Science has spent decades trying to understand what separates the mind of someone who creates breakthroughs from the mind of someone who simply maintains the status quo. What they have found, buried inside decades of neuroscience research, is not a difference in intelligence, in the way intelligence is commonly measured. It is not a difference in education or opportunity or raw cognitive horsepower. What separates the mind that breaks through from the mind that stays behind is a specific pattern of electrical activity in the brain, a specific rhythm, a specific wave. And when the researchers mapped the brains of the most creative, most intuitive, most spiritually aware individuals they could find, The wave that appeared most consistently was not the wave of focused analytical thought. It was something deeper, something slower and yet paradoxically more powerful. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma, and beneath gamma, feeding it, preparing the ground for is a wave called theta. Theta waves operate between 4 and 8 cycles per second. That is the rhythm of deep intuition, of creative flow, of the state where the boundary between conscious thought and deeper knowing becomes permeable. Children live in theta almost constantly, which is why they learn so rapidly, why they are so open, why they have not yet built the walls of skepticism and self-limitation that adults spend years constructing and then more years trying to dismantle. And gamma, the wave that researchers have called the signature of insight, the electrical pattern that fires in the brain in the moment of genuine breakthrough, of the eureka that changes everything. Gamma and theta work together in the minds of people who are operating at their highest capacity. Now hear this carefully, because this is where the spiritual and the scientific stop being separate conversations. The state that produces theta and gamma activity in the brain is the same state that the ancient chosen ones accessed through prayer, through fasting, through the kind of deep surrender that Jabez demonstrated when he opened his mouth and asked God to rewrite the boundaries of his life. The mystics called it contemplation. The prophets called it waiting on the Lord. The neuroscientists call it brainwave entrainment. But what they are all describing from their different vantage points is the same phenomenon. A human mind that has dropped below the noise of ordinary mental activity and entered a frequency where something greater than ordinary thinking becomes possible. This is where Dr. James Rivers enters the conversation. A neuroscientist with over 30 years of research into brain function, trained in one of the most rigorous academic environments in the world, and connected to research programs that have studied human cognitive performance at the highest level. Dr. Rivers spent the better part of 3 decades asking one question: why do some people seem to access levels of mental clarity, creativity, and intuitive wisdom that most people never reach? And what is happening in the brain when they do it? The answer he arrived at, after years of measuring, mapping, and testing, pointed directly to the theta-gamma relationship. And the discovery that changed everything was this: the brain can be guided into that state, not through years of meditation practice, not through pharmaceutical intervention, not through a complete restructuring of your lifestyle or a retreat to a silent monastery, through sound, through precisely calibrated audio, frequencies that the brain naturally synchronizes with, the way a tuning fork causes a nearby string to vibrate at the same pitch without ever touching it. The technology is called brainwave entrainment, and the specific protocol that Dr. Rivers developed, refined, and tested across thousands of participants is called the Genius Wave. It is 7 minutes of precisely engineered audio designed to guide your brain gently but deliberately into the state that your neurology was always capable of reaching, but that the stress, the noise, the accumulated weight of adult life, and yes, the pain that you have been carrying had been blocking. 7 minutes. Not an hour of disciplined meditation, not a retreat, not a course of pharmaceutical treatment. 7 minutes of listening with headphones in whatever quiet space you can find, and your brain begins to do what it was designed to do before the world taught it to stay in survival mode. And here is where the spiritual truth and the neuroscience converge in a way that should not surprise the chosen one. Pain suppresses theta. Chronic stress, chronic grief, chronic uncertainty, the kind of weight that you have been carrying through the cycles that Section 1 described, These states push the brain into high-frequency survival patterns that lock the very gateway through which your highest intuition, your God-given and creativity, your prophetic sensitivity, flow. This means that the pain has not just been an emotional burden. It has been a neurological lock on the frequency that makes you most fully yourself. The genius wave is not just a self-help tool. For the chosen one, it is the instrument through which the neurological lock that pain created is gently, systematically released. A woman who had spent 14 months unable to sleep more than a few hours at a stretch, who had been moving through her days in the fog that prolonged grief produces, who had tried every approach available to her and found temporary relief at best, listened to the 7-minute audio one evening before bed. She was not expecting a dramatic experience. She was simply desperate enough to try one more thing. She reported that when the audio ended, she sat in the silence afterward and felt, for the first time in over a year, that her mind had stopped running. Not because she had forced it to stop, but because something in the frequency had given it permission to settle. She slept through the night. The following Monday, a phone call she had been waiting on for nearly a year finally came through. She wrote afterward that she could not explain the connection between 7 minutes of audio and the shift that followed. But she knew without question that something in her had become available to receive what had always been on its way to her. Another man, a professional who had been watching his capacity for creative problem-solving diminish under the weight of financial stress and professional uncertainty, began using the Genius Wave daily. Within 3 weeks, he described what he called a return of himself. Ideas that had stopped coming began to flow again. The mental fog that had made even simple decisions feel laborious began to clear. He said it felt less like gaining something new and more like recovering something that had always belonged to him, but had been buried under everything he had been carrying. These are not exceptional cases. They are representative of what happens when the brain of a chosen one is given the frequency it was always designed to operate in, after a season of pain has been suppressing it. Now, there is something that needs to be said honestly before anything else. The price of the Genius Wave is $39. And some of you heard that and felt something shift, because $39 is not nothing. Not when the bank account is already stretched. Not when the month has more expenses than it has days. Not when you have spent money before on things that promised transformation and delivered disappointment. That feeling is valid, fully valid. You are not wrong to be cautious. You are not wrong to count the cost before you commit. That is wisdom, not weakness. But consider this. What is the cost of another month inside the cycle that has been repeating? What is the price of another season in the neurological state that pain has locked you into, where your creativity cannot reach you, where your intuition is muffled, where the frequency of the chosen one is suppressed beneath the noise of survival? The $39 is not a purchase. It is a decision, a declaration, in practical terms, that you are choosing to invest in the version of yourself that June 11 is trying to release. The Genius Wave normally carried a price of $49, but through the link in the pinned comment and the description below this video, it is available today for just $39. And it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Not 30 days, 90. 3 full months to use it to experience what happens when your brain is given the frequency it was designed for. And if at any point in those 90 days you feel that it has not delivered anything of value, you receive every dollar back. No complicated process, no questions designed to make you feel guilty for asking. The guarantee is real because the results are real. One important thing must be said clearly. There are imitation products using similar language and imagery that are not the original protocol developed by Dr. Rivers. The only authorized source for the genuine genius wave is the link in the pinned comment and the video description. Do not purchase from any other source. What you receive elsewhere will not be what was designed, tested, and refined over 30 years of genuine neuroscience research. The link below is the only door to the real thing. And that door will not remain open at this price indefinitely. The $39 access point is a limited window. The number of people who can receive it at this price in this season is finite. This is not a manufactured urgency designed to pressure you. It is simply the reality of how this offer has been structured. The chosen one who moves when heaven signals does not find the door closed. The chosen one who waits for perfect certainty before stepping forward often finds that the threshold has shifted by the time they arrive. You have already endured the cost of waiting. You have already paid in sleepless nights and suppressed potential and repeating cycles, more than $39 worth of delay. Today, the door is open. The frequency is available. And the brain that God built for you, the one that was designed to carry the theta gamma signature of the chosen, is waiting for permission to be itself again. And even as that door stands open, even as the practical path forward has been laid clearly before you, something in the spirit knows that the outer tool is only ever as powerful as the inner readiness of the one who uses it. Because heaven does not work through mechanisms alone. Heaven works through consecrated vessels. And what is being built in you right now, through every word that has landed in this message, is not just information. It is preparation. It is the quiet, steady work of a God who never separates the practical from the spiritual, who never offers a key without also preparing the hand that will turn it, who never opens a door without first doing something in the interior life of the chosen one that makes them capable of walking through it and remaining on the other side. So let the science settle into your spirit. Let the understanding of what your brain was designed for become not just a fascinating fact, but a living faith. Because the God who engineered the human mind to operate on frequencies of creativity and intuition and breakthrough did not do so accidentally. He did not stumble upon theta waves as an afterthought. He built them into the architecture of the human brain as a permanent invitation, a standing door between the finite mind and the infinite wisdom of the one who made it. And every time you access that frequency, every time you create the conditions in which your neurology can do what it was designed to do, you are not just optimizing your brain function. You are answering an invitation that was extended to you before you were born. This is why Jabez did not approach God with an apology for asking. He did not preface his prayer with a long explanation of why he probably did not deserve what he was about to request. He simply opened his mouth and directed his faith toward the God who had made him, trusting that the one who had placed the desire for more territory in his heart was the same one who had the authority and the willingness to grant it. And God granted him that which he requested, not because Jabez had earned it, through perfect behavior or flawless theological understanding, but because Jabez believed that the God who made him had not done so in order for him to remain defined by the name his pain had given him. That same trust is what this season is asking of you. Not the trust that removes all uncertainty before it commits. Not the trust that waits until every question has been answered and every risk has been eliminated. The trust that moves forward in the presence of uncertainty because the word that has been spoken over your life is more authoritative than the fear that is opposing it. The trust that says, I do not have complete clarity about what is on the other side of this threshold, but I know who is holding the door open, and that is enough. And the chosen one who carries that kind of trust is not naive. They are not uninformed. They are not ignoring the reality of their circumstances or pretending that the pain of the past did not happen. The chosen one who walks in this kind of trust is the one who has processed enough of their suffering to know that it was never random, who has endured enough dark nights to understand that the darkness was always purposeful, who has carried enough weight to recognize that what they were carrying was building something in them that effortless seasons never could have produced. Because there is a specific kind of strength that only comes from having survived what should have broken you. There is a specific kind of clarity that only comes from having sat in the confusion long enough to stop demanding that it resolve on your timeline. There is a specific kind of authority that only comes from having walked through the valley and emerged on the other side, not unchanged, but undefeated. And that is the authority that heaven is about to put to work in your life. Not the authority of someone who has always had it easy. The authority of the chosen one who has been tested in the fire and come out not burned but refined. The prophet Isaiah carried that authority. He spoke into circumstances that looked utterly immovable. He declared restoration to a people who had every natural reason to believe that restoration was impossible. He did not wait until the landscape matched his proclamation before he opened his mouth. He opened his mouth, and the proclamation began to create the landscape. That is the posture of the chosen one who understands that they do not speak to describe reality. They speak to establish it. And what you are being called to establish in this season, through your words, through your faith, through your willingness to step through the door that June 11 is holding open, is a new reality. Not a slightly improved version of the old one, not a carefully managed upgrade that keeps one foot in the familiar while cautiously extending the other toward the unknown. A genuinely new reality. One in which the name that pain gave you has no more authority. One in which the territory of your life is no longer bounded by the conditions of your origin. One in which the frequency you carry, the Theta Gamma signature of the chosen, is no longer suppressed beneath the weight of what you have been through, but is flowing freely, fully, in alignment with the divine assignment that was written over you before a single day of your suffering began. But to live in that new reality, something must be released. Not forgotten, not denied, released. There is a difference between forgetting your pain and no longer being owned by it. There is a difference between pretending the hard seasons did not happen and choosing to stop letting them have the final word about who you are and what your life is allowed to become. The release that heaven is asking of you is not the erasure of your story. It is the reframing of it. It is the decision to look at everything you have survived and say, this was not evidence that I was forgotten. This was proof that I was being prepared. This was not punishment. This was qualification. This was not the end of my story. This was the beginning of the chapter that makes everything before it makes sense. That reframing is not a one-time event. It is a practice. It is something you return to every morning when the old thoughts try to reassert themselves. Every time the familiar voice of limitation attempts to remind you of your name, the name that pain gave you, you return to the reframe. You return to the truth that God granted Jabez, that which he requested. You return to the reality that the same God is listening to you right now. You return to the frequency. You return to the 7 minutes that give your brain permission to access the state in which truth is not just known intellectually but felt, experienced, integrated, at a level that transforms how you move through the world. This is why the practical and the spiritual are never truly separate in the life of the chosen one. The audio protocol is not a replacement for faith. It is an instrument of alignment. It is the tool that helps vessel become as clear and available as possible so that what heaven wants to pour through it can flow without obstruction. Think of it the way a musician tunes their instrument before a performance. The tuning does not create the music. The musician creates the music. But without the tuning, the most gifted musician in the world cannot produce what they were designed to produce. The genius wave is the tuning. Your faith, your prayer, your willingness to stand at the threshold of June 11 and say yes, that is the music. And the music that heaven wants to hear from your life in this next season is not a quiet, apologetic melody played in the corner where no one will notice it. It is a sound that fills every room you enter. It is a frequency that shifts the atmosphere around you without you having to announce yourself or explain yourself or justify your presence. It is the natural emanation of a chosen one who has come into full alignment with the assignment that was placed on them before they were born. Isaiah chapter 43 verse 18 and 19 speaks directly into this moment with a clarity that feels less like ancient poetry and more like a direct communication from heaven to the specific situation you are standing in right now. Isaiah chapter 43 verses 18 and 19. Remember ye not the former things, neither consider the things of old. Behold, I will do a new thing, now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it? I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Now it shall spring forth. Not eventually. Not when the circumstances align more favorably. Not when you have done enough inner work to deserve it now. Heaven uses that word deliberately. Because the chosen one, who keeps postponing their breakthrough, who keeps waiting for a more convenient moment to step into their fullness, is not being humble. They are being disobedient to a divine now that requires a present tense response. The new thing is already springing forth. The way in the wilderness is already being made. The rivers in the desert of your dry season are already flowing beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when the chosen one stops looking at the sand and starts believing that water is coming. That moment is this moment. The desert you have been walking through was never your destination. It was your preparation ground, and the preparation is complete. You came into this message carrying something heavy, a weight that has been with you long enough that you have almost forgotten what it felt like to move without it. But that weight was never meant to be permanent. It was the resistance training of the chosen, the divinely engineered pressure that was building in you the exact capacity you will need for the territory that is about to be enlarged. Jabez knew this without being able to articulate it in modern language. He knew that the God who allowed him to be born into pain was the same God who had more than enough authority to rewrite the boundary lines of his life. And he asked, and heaven answered, "Now it is your turn." The God who answered Jabez is the same God who has been listening through every page of your story, every chapter that felt like a mistake, every season that felt like abandonment, every night that felt like the darkness was winning. He was there, he is here, and June 11 is the date he has chosen to let you feel just how close he has been all along. The new thing is springing forth. Can you see it? There is a specific kind of pain that belongs only to the chosen. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not arrive with a clear explanation attached or a timeline for when it will end. It settles in quietly, the way a season changes, gradually, almost perceptibly, until one day you look around and realize that the landscape of your inner life has shifted into something unfamiliar. You have been living in that landscape for a while now, not because you are weak, not because your faith is insufficient, not because you somehow failed to do the things that were supposed to prevent this kind of suffering, but because the chosen one is always trained in the wilderness before they are deployed in the promised land. And the wilderness is not comfortable. The wilderness is not meant to be. The wilderness is the place where everything that is not essential is stripped away, where everything that was never truly yours falls off, where the real shape of who you are begins to emerge from beneath the layers of who the world told you to be. Jabez was born into that wilderness. He did not choose it. He did not apply for the assignment of entering the world under the shadow of a name that announced suffering before he had the chance to say a single word about himself. He simply arrived, the way you arrived into the particular set of circumstances that shaped the earliest chapters of your story without consent and without a manual. And yet what the scripture records about Jabez is not the wilderness. What it records is what he did. While he was in it, he prayed. Not a prayer of resignation, not the prayer of someone who had accepted that the name given to them at birth was the ceiling of their life. He prayed with the audacity of someone who had decided, in the middle of circumstances that gave him every reason to stay small, that the God who made him was bigger than the pain that named him. And that decision, that single act of radical spiritual audacity, is what separated the story of Jabez from every other name in that long genealogical list. Because the list is full of people who were born, lived, and died without the record pausing to note anything remarkable about them. They existed. They passed through. They left names but not stories. Jabez left a story. Not because his circumstances were more favorable, not because his starting point was more advantageous, but because he refused to let the conditions of his beginning write the conclusion of his life. He reached past the name. He reached past the pain. He reached directly into the heart of a God who was already inclined to enlarge him, and he asked. That is the difference between the chosen one who steps into their destiny and the chosen one who carries their potential to the grave without ever releasing it. It is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not a more favorable set of external conditions. It is the decision to reach, to open the mouth when silence feels safer, to ask when asking feels presumptuous, to believe that the territory is available when every visible circumstance is pointing toward limitation. That reaching is what this season is demanding of you. Not passivity dressed up as patience, not waiting dressed up as wisdom. Active, deliberate faith anchored reaching toward the God who has already authorized what you are about to ask for. Because the pain of this particular season, the weight of June, the specific suffering that has followed you into this message today, was never designed to be your permanent address. It was designed to be your training ground. And there is a crucial distinction between those two things that the enemy has worked very hard to blur in your perception. The training ground is temporary. It has a graduation date built into its design. It has a moment encoded within it when the one being trained has absorbed everything the season was sent to teach them, and the teacher releases them into the next chapter. But if the enemy can convince you that the training ground is your destination, he can keep you circling it indefinitely, drawing the lessons out past their intended duration, keeping you in the preparation long after the preparation is complete. June 11 is your graduation date, not a metaphorical graduation, a genuine, heaven-ordained release from the training ground into the territory that the preparation was always building you toward. And the pain that has marked this season is not evidence that graduation has been postponed. It is evidence that the training was intense, because the assignment is significant. The wilderness that has been most difficult is always the one that precedes the most important deployment. The night that has felt longest is always the one that immediately precedes the dawn that changes everything. Think for a moment about what you have actually survived to be sitting here right now. Not in a general sense, but specifically. Think about the particular things that came at you in the last 12 months alone. The moments when the ground shifted beneath your feet and you had no warning. The conversations that rearranged your understanding of relationships you thought were stable. The doors that closed without explanation, that left you standing in a corridor, wondering which direction to move. The nights when the weight of what you were carrying was so specific and so heavy that you could not share it with anyone because the full complexity of it would have taken longer to explain than the night would allow. You survived all of it, every single piece. You are here, not diminished, not destroyed, qualified. Every layer of pain that you have moved through has been adding something to you that comfort could never have produced. Endurance. The specific kind of endurance that does not just survive difficulty, but learns to navigate it, to extract wisdom from it, to find the signal inside the noise of suffering that points toward purpose. Compassion. The kind that can only come from having genuinely hurt, from having needed help and not always found it, from having been in the dark long enough to understand instinctively what someone else needs when they find themselves in a darkness of their own. Authority. The kind that is not borrowed from titles or credentials or the approval of other people, but is earned in the private chambers of tested faith, in the moments when no one was watching and you chose to hold on anyway. These are not small things. These are the precise qualifications for the assignment that is waiting on the other side of June 11. The people whose lives your life is about to touch are not going to need someone who has had it easy. They are going to need someone who has been where they are, someone who carries the unmistakable credibility of having survived what they are currently enduring. Someone whose voice, when it speaks into their darkness, carries the particular warmth of someone who knows that room from the inside. That is you. That has always been you. And the pain that felt like punishment was actually the curriculum for this specific commission. The wilderness of Jabez was not wasted. Every day he woke up, carrying a name that announced sorrow, was a day that was building in him the kind of hunger for something different that would eventually express itself in a prayer bold enough to move heaven. He did not arrive at that prayer easily. He arrived at it through the accumulated pressure of a life that had given him every reason to stay exactly where he was, and yet something in him, the chosen frequency, the theta gamma signature of someone marked before birth, kept insisting that more was not only possible but promised. That insistence is not your pride. That knowing inside you that says more is supposed to happen. That says the ceiling you are currently living under is not the real ceiling. That says the territory of your life is not supposed to be this bounded. That insistence is the voice of heaven speaking through your spirit. Do not silence it in the name of humility. True humility is not the denial of what God has placed in you. True humility is the acknowledgement that what He placed in you is not yours to withhold from the world. The gift was given for a purpose that extends beyond your own comfort. The calling was spoken over you for the sake of people whose names you do not yet know. The territory that is about to be enlarged is not just for your benefit. It is for the benefit of everyone whose life is supposed to intersect with yours in the season that is coming. So let the pain speak its last word. Not the word it has been speaking over your identity, the word that tries to name you by your worst moments and your most difficult chapters. Let it speak the word it was always carrying underneath the suffering. The word of purpose, the word of preparation, the word that says this was not an accident, this was an appointment, and the appointment is now complete. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 32 and 33 carries a truth for this exact moment. A truth that the man of sorrows understands from the inside, that the chosen one in the middle of their wilderness needs to hear with absolute clarity. Lamentations chapter 3, verses 32 and 33. But though he cause grief, yet will he have compassion, according to the multitude of his mercies. For he doth not afflict willingly, nor grieve the children of men. He does not afflict willingly. The pain was not his preference. It was his permission, granted because he could see what it was building, because he knew what the territory on the other side required, because he trusted that the chosen one he had marked was strong enough to be trained by it without being destroyed by it. And he was right. You are here. You made it through every night that tried to be your last. You carried every weight that tried to be your permanent identity. You endured every season that tried to convince you that the wilderness was your final destination. And you are still here, still reaching, still choosing to believe that the God who named Chabis more honorable than his circumstances, the same God who is listening to you right now, has a word over your life that the pain never had the authority to overwrite. The grief of this season is reaching its conclusion. The compassion that Lamentations promises is not distant and theoretical. It is present and specific and moving toward you with an intentionality that June 11 is about to make visible in ways you have not yet been able to imagine. The wilderness was real. The pain was real. And the graduation is just as real, just as specific, just as divinely authorized as everything that preceded it. You are not almost through. You are through, and what is waiting on the other side has your name written on it in the handwriting of heaven. You are still here, and that means something. Not in the casual sense of someone who simply pressed play and let a video run in the background while their attention drifted somewhere else. You are here in the way that the chosen are present when heaven is speaking directly into the specific coordinates of their life. You are here the way Jabez was present in the moment his prayer left his lips, fully in it, fully engaged, fully aware that what was happening in that moment was not ordinary. And the fact that you have stayed, that you have allowed every section of this message to land without pulling away, tells heaven something important about you. It tells heaven that you are ready, not almost ready, not preparing to be ready somewhere in the future when conditions improve. Ready now, present now, available now. And readiness has a posture. It is not passive. It is not the posture of someone sitting with arms crossed, waiting to be convinced of one more thing before they commit to the direction heaven is pointing them. Readiness in the life of the chosen one is an active orientation. It is the leaning forward of someone who has heard the word, recognized it as their own, and is already beginning to align their actions with the reality that the word is announcing. It is the posture of someone who understands that faith without corresponding movement is not really faith at all. It is agreement without investment. And the chosen one is not called to agree from a distance. They are called to participate. Jabez did not simply think about his prayer. He did not compose it privately in his mind and decide that God probably already knew what he needed, so the actual speaking of it was unnecessary. He called on the God of Israel, out loud, deliberately. With the full weight of his intention behind every word, he made a move. He took the internal reality of his faith and gave it external expression. And that external expression is what the scripture records as the moment everything changed. Not the thought, not the feeling, not the private acknowledgement that he deserved more than his name suggested. The call, the reaching out, the deliberate, visible, audible act of a man who had decided that heaven was worth addressing directly. This is the moment when your faith needs a corresponding action. And the action that this moment is asking of you is simpler than you might expect. It does not require a dramatic gesture or a grand public declaration. It requires the kind of small, consistent, faithful movement that compounds over time into something the world cannot ignore. And one of the most powerful forms of that movement in the season you are walking into is the act of staying connected to the flow of what heaven is, releasing through this message and through this ministry. Because here is something that the chosen one needs to understand about the way divine information flows in this generation. The word that is changing lives is not locked inside the walls of a single building that you have to travel to in order to receive it. It is moving through channels that were not available to any previous generation, channels that reach into homes and vehicles, and hospital waiting rooms, and kitchen tables at 3 in the morning when someone is sitting in the dark, wondering if anyone in the universe is aware of their specific pain. This message reached you through one of those channels. And if it has done something in you, if it has shifted something, unlocked something, named something that had been living in you without language, then you understand instinctively that what just happened to you needs to happen to others. There is someone in your life right now who is carrying the exact weight that this message was built to address. You know who they are. Their face may have come to mind already, more than once, as this word was unfolding. Someone who has been circling the same mountain of pain long enough that they have stopped expecting the circle to ever break. Someone who was named by their suffering, the way Jabez was named by his mother's grief, and who has not yet heard the word that reminds them that the name given by pain is not the name written by heaven. Someone who is standing at a threshold very similar to the one that June 11 represents for you, but who does not yet know that the door is open. That person needs this message, and the way you get it to them is not complicated. You share it. You press the share button right now, before this section ends. Before the next wave of the message carries you forward, you send this to the person whose face is in your mind. Not because you have been asked to perform a social media action as a condition of receiving what heaven has for you, but because the chosen one has always understood that the blessing that flows into them is never meant to pool and stagnate. It is meant to move through them and out into the lives of the people their assignment connects them to. Sharing this message is not a favor to this channel. It is an act of ministry. It is the chosen one functioning in the role they were created for, as a conduit, as a carrier, as someone through whom the word of heaven reaches the people who need it most. And if this message has been a source of something real for you, if these words have touched a place that needed to be touched, if the truth that has been spoken here has begun to do work in your spirit that you can already feel the effects of, then there is another form of participation that this ministry wants to extend an invitation for. The link to support this work financially is in the description and in the pinned comment below. And before any thought of obligation arises, hear this. Clearly, there is no pressure attached to that invitation. None. The word that was released over your life today was not conditional on your financial participation, and it never will be. What is offered in that link is simply an opportunity for those who feel genuinely moved to become partners in what heaven is doing through this channel. To say, with a practical act, I believe in this work, and I want it to continue reaching the people who need it. Because this kind of ministry has a cost that is invisible to the viewer, but very real to the ones who carry it. The hours of prayer that precede every word spoken, the careful, deliberate work of building each message, not as content, but as a consecrated communication from heaven to a specific person who is waiting for it without knowing it is coming. The infrastructure that keeps the channel accessible to someone in a distant city who stumbles onto it at 2 in the morning and finds exactly what they needed. All of that requires resources, and the people who partner financially with this work are not just supporting a channel. They are co-laborers in a harvest that is reaching people across geographies and time zones, and life circumstances with a word that is changing the trajectory of lives that had begun to lose their sense of direction. So if the Spirit is moving in you in that direction, the link is there. Use it as an act of worship. Use it as a seed sown into ground that you have already seen produce fruit in your own life today. Use it as the practical expression of a faith that has heard something real and wants to participate in its continued expansion. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, this is the moment to do that. Not as an algorithm-driven request, but as a genuine pastoral invitation. What was released today is not a single message designed to stand alone. It is part of a continuous flow of prophetic word and spiritual counsel that is building week by week into something that the chosen ones who stay connected will recognize over time as a sustained source of divine nourishment for the journey they are on. Subscribe so that the next word that heaven releases through this channel finds you immediately. Subscribe so that the door to what is coming is not accidentally closed because the notification never reached you. Subscribe because the chosen one who is walking into the season that June 11 is opening needs every source of genuine spiritual sustenance that heaven has made available to them. And like this message, not as a gesture of social approval, but as a signal to the system that distributes this word that it deserves to travel further. That the person who needs it in a city you have never visited deserves the chance to have it reach them the way it reached you today. Every like is a vote for the expansion of what heaven is releasing through this channel. Every like is the chosen one saying, this word is real, this word is needed, this word deserves more ground. Jabez asked for enlarged territory, and God granted him that which he requested. You are living in your own Jabez moment right now. And one of the ways the territory of this ministry enlarges, one of the ways the word reaches the people who are sitting in their specific wilderness without yet knowing that a door is about to open, is through the simple, faithful, powerful act of a chosen one who received something real and then made sure it kept moving. So like, share, subscribe, support if the Spirit moves you, not out of obligation, out of the overflow of someone who has received a word that was worth receiving and who understands that the chosen one was never designed to be a dead end for divine information. They were designed to be a channel, and the channel that stays open, that stays connected, that keeps the word moving forward into new territory, is the channel through which heaven keeps pouring. The word is still flowing. The message is not finished. And the best of what June 11 carries for you is still ahead in what remains of this message. Stay with it, because heaven is not done speaking to the chosen one who was brave enough to remain present for the whole conversation. There is a record being kept that you cannot see, not a record of your failures, not a ledger of the moments when you fell short or lost your footing or said the wrong thing or made the choice that you later wished you could take back. That is not the record heaven keeps. The record heaven keeps is something far more detailed and far more merciful than the one the enemy has been trying to convince you is the definitive account of your life. Heaven keeps a record of every moment you chose to hold on when letting go would have been easier. Every night you pressed through when the darkness was so complete that pressing through required more faith than you felt you actually possessed. Every morning you got up and tried again when the evidence available to you in that moment gave you very little rational reason to believe that trying again would produce a different result. Every silent prayer offered from a place so depleted that the prayer had no eloquence, no structure, no theological precision, just the raw and honest reaching of a spirit that still believed, against considerable opposition, that the God who made it was listening. That record is precise. Heaven does not round down. Heaven does not average out the moments of extraordinary faithfulness against the moments of very human fragility, and give you a middle score that fails to honor the full complexity of what you have actually endured. Every specific moment is noted. Every tear that fell in a room where no one was watching is cataloged. Every time you chose compassion, so when bitterness would have been more immediately satisfying. Every time you extended grace to someone who had not earned it because something in your spirit understood, even when your emotions were screaming. Otherwise, that grace is not about what is earned, but about what is needed. Every time you protected your integrity in a situation where compromising it would have been far more convenient. All of it, noted, recorded, honored. And Jabez understood this about the God he was addressing when he opened his mouth to pray. He was not speaking into a void. He was not sending a request into an indifferent universe and hoping that something cosmic might happen to be listening on that particular day. He was addressing a God who already knew him, a God who had been watching his life from the moment his mother gave him a name saturated with her own pain. A God who had seen every morning that Jabez woke up under the weight of a name that announced sorrow, and yet chose to move through his day with the dignity of someone who refused to be reduced to what his circumstances suggested about him. Jabez prayed with the confidence of someone who knew that the one he was speaking to was already thoroughly acquainted with his story, and that acquaintance was not neutral. It was warm. It was attentive. It was the attentiveness of a God who had specifically noted that this man, born into pain, named by grief, was more honorable than his brothers. That same attentiveness has been directed at your life throughout every season of your journey, including the seasons that felt most abandoned, including the nights when the silence of heaven felt less like holy mystery and more like simple absence, including the moments when you asked a direct question and received what felt like no answer, and you had to make a choice about whether the silence meant God was not there or whether it meant God was working in a register that your current circumstances did not yet have the capacity to translate. Those were the moments that built something in you that the easy seasons never could have touched. And those were precisely the moments that heaven was watching most closely. Not to observe your struggle with detachment, but to be present in it, underneath it, working within it, doing something in the unseen architecture of your life that the visible circumstances were temporarily concealing. Because that is how heaven operates in the life of the chosen one. Not always with visible, immediately interpretable signs. Not always with the kind of dramatic, unmistakable intervention that removes all ambiguity and makes faith feel effortless. Often with a quieter, more patient, more interior presence that is only fully recognized in retrospect, when you look back from the vantage point of having crossed a threshold and see, with sudden clarity, how every piece of the journey was being guided even when the guidance felt invisible. You will have that retrospective clarity about this season, you will stand on the other side of what June 11 is opening and look back at the road that brought you here and see it differently than you see it now. The things that looked like obstacles will look like preparation. The things that looked like losses will look like removals of what was never meant to travel with you into your next chapter. The things that looked like delays will look like the precise timing of a God who knew exactly when the door needed to open to ensure that the chosen one walking through it was fully equipped for what waited on the other side. But that future clarity does not help you in the present moment the way you need to be helped right now. And heaven knows that. Heaven does not ask you to live in retrospect. Heaven asks you to trust in the present, to believe in the middle of the journey, before the view from the other side is available to you, that the one who is guiding the journey is competent, attentive, and deeply committed to the outcome he has promised. That is the ask, not certainty, not the elimination of all doubt. Before faith is required of you, trust, the active, present tense, forward-facing decision to move in the direction heaven is pointing even when the full picture is not yet visible. And you have been doing that, perhaps imperfectly, perhaps with more hesitation than you wish you had brought to it, perhaps with more circling back to the familiar than your best self would have chosen. But you have been doing it. Every time you return to this message after a moment of wanting to step away, every time you let a word land in a place that was tender and chose not to close yourself off to it, every time you felt the pull of the old narrative, the one that said the pain was permanent and the cycle was unbreakable and the territory was always going to be as bounded as it currently appears, and you chose instead to keep listening. That choosing is faith. Not the faith of a theological textbook, the faith of a living person in the middle of a real and difficult journey who keeps saying yes to heaven even when yes costs something. The chosen one who stays in the room when the word is hard is the chosen one who receives the full measure of what the word was sent to deliver. And you have stayed in the room. Through every section of this message, through every truth that required you to look honestly at the cycles and the patterns and the ways that spiritual delay has cost you more than you wanted to admit, you have stayed. And heaven has been noting that too, adding it to the record. Not the record of what you owe, but the record of what you are owed. The record of faithfulness that the God of Jabez has never once failed to honor. Because the God who granted Jabez that which he requested was not doing something exceptional that day. He was doing something consistent. He was being exactly who he has always been. A God who sees the chosen one carrying more than they were meant to carry alone. Who hears the prayer that is bold enough to ask for enlargement instead of settling for the boundaries that pain established, and who responds with a generosity that matches the audacity of the faith that reached toward it. That is, not a God who is selective about which of his children he notices. That is a God who has a record of every single one of them and who is moving, in ways both visible and invisible, toward the fulfillment of every word he has spoken over every life he has marked. Your name is in that record. Your nights are in that record. Your prayers are in that record. Your endurance is in that record. Your tears are in that record. And the word that was spoken over your life before you arrived in this world, the word that named you not by your pain, but by your purpose, that word is in that record too. And it has not expired. It has not been revised or retracted or placed on hold, because the circumstances of your journey became more complicated than originally anticipated. It stands, unmodified, fully authorized, ready to be fulfilled in the season that is now arriving. This is what heaven wants you to carry into the remaining hours of this day. not anxiety about whether you have done enough to deserve what is coming, not the performance pressure of a chosen one who is afraid that one wrong move might disqualify them from the blessing they have been waiting for. Simply the quiet, steady, deep knowing that you are seen, fully seen. Not the curated version of yourself that you present to the world, but the real one. The one who struggles and questions and sometimes falls and always gets back up. That one is the one heaven has been watching. And that is the one heaven is about to publicly vindicate. Psalm chapter 56 verse 8 speaks into the precision of divine attention with a tenderness that is difficult to encounter without feeling something shift in the chest. Psalm chapter 56 verse 8. Thou tellest my wanderings. Put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? Your tears are in his bottle, not lost, not evaporated into insignificance, collected, preserved, each one known, each one accounted for, each one carrying weight in the divine economy that transforms the suffering of the chosen one into the currency of their next chapter. The God who keeps your tears in a bottle is not a God who has been indifferent to your pain. He is a God who has been so attentive to it that he has preserved every drop of it as evidence of your faithfulness in a season that required more of you than any season should have. And that evidence is about to be presented on your behalf, not in a courtroom of condemnation, but in a throne room of vindication. The record is complete. The testimony of your endurance is comprehensive. And the verdict that heaven is about to pronounce over your life is not the verdict that pain has been lobbying for. It is the verdict that was written before the pain arrived. The one that says chosen, the one that says more honorable, the one that says the territory is enlarged, the one that says granted. Heaven has been watching every moment you thought you were alone, and it has not missed a single one. There are moments in the life of the chosen one when everything that has been building beneath the surface finally reaches the threshold where it can no longer remain invisible, where the invisible work of heaven, the quiet, patient, precise preparation that has been happening in the unseen architecture of a life, breaks through into the visible with a suddenness that takes the breath away. Not because it was sudden, in the way that unexpected things are sudden, arriving without warning from a direction no one anticipated, but sudden in the way that a sunrise is sudden. It was always coming. The darkness was never permanent. The horizon was always the place where the light was going to appear. But when it finally breaks, when that first edge of gold touches the line where sky meets earth, the beauty of it, the relief of it, the sheer undeniable reality of it, lands with a force that feels immediate even though it was always inevitable. That is where you are standing right now. Not in the middle of the darkness, not even in the long, ambiguous gray of early pre-dawn. You are standing at the exact moment before the sunrise breaks. The horizon of your life is lit from beneath with the approaching fulfillment of everything that has been promised over you, and the specific date that heaven has pressed into this season, June 11, is not a random point on a calendar. It is the moment the light breaks. It is the threshold between what has been and what is about to be. It is the line that Jabez crossed when he finished praying and heaven answered. It is the line that every chosen one reaches after a season of preparation so thorough, so complete, so deeply formative that when the breakthrough finally arrives, they are genuinely ready to hold it. But something must happen before the sunrise can be fully received. Something must shift in the inner posture of the chosen one that moves them from anticipating the breakthrough to inhabiting it. Because there is a difference between a person who is waiting for something and a person who has already begun to live from the reality of what they are waiting for. The first person is positioned outside the promise, looking toward it from a distance, watching it the way someone watches a fire. Through a window, aware of its warmth, but not yet inside it. The second person has moved their spiritual center of gravity inside the promise, and they are living from it even before every external circumstance has confirmed it. That second posture is what faith actually is, at its most mature and most powerful expression. Not the faith that believes when all the evidence supports the belief. The faith that believes in the gap, the space between the promise and the proof. And in that, believing begins to create the conditions through which the proof arrives. Jebs did not pray and then resume living as though the prayer had never been offered. The act of calling on the God of Israel with that specific, bold, unashamed request was itself a repositioning. It was Jabez moving his inner life into alignment with the enlarged territory. Before the enlarged territory was visible in his external circumstances. He prayed as someone who expected to be heard. He asked as someone who expected the answer to arrive. And the scripture records that God granted him that which he requested, as if the granting and the asking were almost simultaneous events, as if the moment the faith of the chosen one reached its full expression, the response of heaven was already in motion before the final word of the prayer had finished forming on his lips. That is the dynamic that is available to you right now. Not the faith that completes all its theological preparation before it commits to belief. The faith that commits to belief as the act through which the preparation is completed. The faith that says, I am going to live from the reality of what June 11 represents before June 11 arrives. Because the God who has been watching every moment of my journey and keeping my tears in a bottle and noting my faithfulness in the record of heaven, is not a God who withholds from the chosen one who reaches toward him with the full weight of their intention. And in this moment, as that faith is crystallizing in your spirit, as the word that has been building through every section of this message reaches its fullest temperature in the core of who you are, heaven is asking for a response. Not a complicated response, not a response that requires extensive preparation or theological precision or the resolution of every lingering doubt before it can be offered. A simple one, the kind that Jabez offered, direct, honest, unashamed, the kind that moves something in the atmosphere the moment it is released into the open. Type these 4 words in the comments right now. My door is open. Not as a formula, not as a ritual designed to trigger a cosmic mechanism into delivering what you want on demand, but as a declaration of posture. As the chosen one saying out loud, in the shared space of this community, I am no longer standing outside the threshold looking in. I have turned to face the door that June 11 is holding open, and I am declaring that I am ready to walk through it. My door is open means I have released the grip of the familiar. My door is open means I have stopped negotiating with the pain about whether it has the right to stay. My door is open means I have moved from the posture of someone who hopes that change might eventually arrive to the posture of someone who has already made room for it, already created the interior space through which it can enter, already positioned their life to receive what heaven has been preparing to release. My door is open. 4 words. Type them now, and as you type them, let them be more than text on a screen. Let them be the sound of a hinge that has been rusted shut by seasons of waiting and years of carrying and months of wondering whether the promised door was ever actually going to appear, finally beginning to move. Let them be the declaration that breaks the silence your faith has kept for too long. Let them be the Jabez prayer of this generation, the bold, specific, unashamed reaching, a chosen one who has decided that the name given by pain is not the name they are living under anymore. Because the community gathering in the comments of this message is not a random collection of viewers who happen to click on the same video. It is a congregation of chosen ones who were each led here by the same divine navigation that brought you here today. Each person who types those 4 words is adding their voice to a declaration that compounds in power with every voice that joins it. There is something that shifts in the spiritual atmosphere when chosen ones agree together in faith, when the individual declarations of individual lives, each carrying their own weight of endurance and their own history of survival, converge into a collective sound that heaven recognizes as the voice of the people it has marked. Your declaration is not isolated. It joins something larger. The person who typed those words 5 minutes before you did is still in the room. The person who will type them 5 minutes after you is already on their way. And the God who hears the prayer of one Jabez hears the prayer of thousands of chosen ones declaring together that the door is open, that the cycle is ending, that the territory is being enlarged, that June 11 is not just a date but a divine appointment, that they are showing up for fully present, fully positioned, fully expectant. This is what it has always meant to be part of the body of the chosen. Not a solitary journey endured in isolation, though the wilderness seasons have often felt exactly that way, but a connected, interdependent, mutually strengthening community of people who carry the same frequency, who have been trained in similar wildernesses, who have survived similar nights, and who are now converging on the same threshold at the same time, because heaven choreographed this gathering with the same precision it uses to choreograph everything else in the lives of the ones it has marked. Jabez prayed alone in the text, but the God he prayed to has always been building a people. And the people that God is building in this generation, through channels that did not exist in any previous era of human history, through the kind of reach that can place a precise word into the specific situation of a chosen one in a city thousands of miles away at 3 in the morning when they need it most, that people is gathering right now in the comments of this message. And their collective declaration, your collective declaration, is a sound that the breakthrough recognizes. It is the frequency that unlocks what has been waiting to be released. So let your declaration join theirs. My door is open. And let it be followed by the internal shift that genuine declaration produces. Let your shoulders settle. Let the breath come from a deeper place. Let the body agree with what the Spirit has just announced. Because the chosen one who has truly crossed the threshold of faith does not only know it as a concept held in the mind. They inhabit it in the body. They carry it in the quality of their breathing and the set of their jaw and the way. Their eyes meet the next moment, not with the guarded wariness of someone who is still waiting to find out whether good things are actually going to happen to them, but with the quiet, steady, unshakable expectancy of someone who has already received the word and is simply allowing the physical world time it needs to catch up with spiritual reality. That is the posture of the open door. That is the posture of the chosen one on the morning of June 11. That is the posture that Jabez carried out of his prayer into the enlarged territory that God had already authorized before the prayer was finished. And it is the posture that you are being invited into right now, in this moment, through 4 words typed into a comment that mean far more than their brevity suggests. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 carries the foundation beneath everything this season has been asking you to trust, the truth that transforms every painful chapter from evidence of abandonment into proof of divine coordination. Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. All things, not the easy things, not the comfortable things that required nothing of you and cost you nothing to receive. All things. The pain that named you before you had words. The cycles that seemed unbreakable. The nights that seemed endless. The prayers that seemed unanswered. The doors that closed without explanation. The seasons that stripped away what you thought you needed only to reveal what you actually were. All of it, working together, in coordination, in a divine choreography so precise that even the suffering was contributing to the good that is now arriving. Even the wilderness was preparing the ground for the territory that is now being enlarged. Even the name given by pain was building in you the audacity to pray the prayer that moves heaven. You are the called. You are the chosen. You are the one whose tears are in the bottle and whose faithfulness is in the record and whose door is not just approaching but open. Open now. Open fully. Open in the way that Jabez experienced the opening of his boundary lines, completely, immediately, without condition or reservation, because the God who authorized it does not do partial grants for chosen ones who pray with their whole heart. My door is open. Type it, mean it, live from it, and watch what June 11 confirms about a God who has never once failed to grant that which his chosen ones requested when they reached toward him with the full, unashamed, audacious faith of someone who knows that the name written over them in heaven is not the name that pain gave them on earth. The sunrise is breaking, the door is open, and the chosen one who declared it is already standing in the light. There is a moment that comes in every journey of the chosen one that cannot be manufactured, cannot be hurried, and cannot be fully explained to someone who has not yet experienced it. It is the moment when the weight that has been defining the journey suddenly shifts, not disappears, not vanishes as though it never existed, but shifts. The way a heavy object shifts when the angle of approach changes and what was immovable becomes, with the right positioning, something that can be lifted. You have been approaching the weight of this season from one angle for a long time. The angle of endurance, the angle of survival, the angle of someone who has been focused primarily on not being destroyed by what they are carrying, on making it through the next hour, the next day, the next month, without losing the thread of faith that has kept them connected to the possibility that something is eventually going to change. That angle has served you. It has kept you in the journey when leaving the journey would have been far easier. But the season that June 11 is introducing requires a different angle. Not the angle of the one who is enduring the weight, the angle of the one who has been promoted above it. And that promotion is not something you apply for. It is not something you earn through a sufficient accumulation of good behavior or theological correctness or the right combination of spiritual disciplines performed at the right frequency. It is something that heaven releases when the preparation is complete, when the chosen one has absorbed everything the training ground was designed to teach them, and the teacher who has been watching the entire process with an attention so precise that not a single moment of the curriculum was accidental, decides that the student is ready, not perfect, not finished growing, not incapable of further development, ready for the next level of the assignment, ready for the territory that the preparation was always building them toward. Ready to carry what is coming without being crushed by it, because the weight of what was already carried has built in them the exact musculature the new assignment requires. You are ready, not in your own estimation, which has been skewed by the proximity of the journey and the accumulated weariness of a season that asks more of you than you ever anticipated. but in heaven's estimation, in the assessment of the one who has been watching every detail, who has the full picture that you have only been able to see in fragments, who knows not only what you have endured, but what that endurance has produced in the unseen architecture of your character and your capacity and your faith. In that assessment, the word that released me over your life right now is not almost ready. It is ready, fully, completely, without qualification. Jabez reached this moment. The scripture does not give us a long account of his internal journey, of the years he spent carrying the name that pain gave him, of the specific mornings when the weight of being called sorrow pressed against him in ways that made the day ahead feel unreasonable. The scripture compresses all of that into a single observation. He was more honorable than his brothers, which tells us everything we need to know about what the unseen years of his journey produced. Not bitterness, not the hardened cynicism of someone who has decided that the world is fundamentally unjust, and the only reasonable response is to stop expecting anything good from it. Honor, the specific, cultivated, chosen quality of someone who has been through something that could have broken them and emerged from it with their integrity not just intact, but deepened, with their character not just preserved but refined, with their capacity for genuine honorable living not diminished by suffering, but enlarged by it. That is what your wilderness has been producing in you, not just survival, honor, the kind that does not require an audience, the kind that is practiced in the private moments when no one is watching and the choice to remain in integrity costs something real, the kind that keeps reaching toward compassion even when bitterness would be more immediately satisfying, the kind that maintains faith in a God who has not yet fully explained the journey, even while that journey has been demanding everything the traveler has. That honor is not a small thing. In heaven's economy, it is the qualification for a sought large territory. It is the evidence that the chosen one who is about to be promoted can be trusted with what the promotion brings, because they demonstrated trustworthiness in the season when being trustworthy required the most and rewarded the least. And now the reward is arriving, not as a transaction, not as a mechanical exchange, where a sufficient quantity of honorable behavior is finally converted into a proportional quantity of blessing, but as the natural outflow of a divine plan that was always moving toward this moment. The territory that is about to be enlarged was always yours. It was written over your life before the wilderness began. The promotion that is arriving with June 11 was not created in response to your endurance. It was prepared before your endurance was required of you. The endurance was the journey toward something that was already waiting. And the something that was already waiting is now close enough that you can feel its nearness, even if you cannot yet see its full shape. Feel that nearness right now. Not as a concept held at the distance of intellectual acknowledgement, but as a present reality pressing against the edges of your current circumstances, with an insistence that is becoming impossible to ignore. Something is close, something that has your name on it, something that was not accessible to the version of you that entered this wilderness because that version had not yet been built into the shape required to receive it. But this version, the one that is listening right now, the one that has been formed by everything the journey has demanded, this version is the exact shape of the vessel that what is coming was designed to fill. This is the truth about the chosen one that the enemy has worked hardest to conceal. Not that suffering exists, he is beefy for the chosen one to know about suffering, to be acquainted with it, to be defined by it if possible. What he works hardest to conceal is the purposefulness of the suffering. Because a chosen one who knows their pain is purposeful, cannot be broken by it. They can be pressed by it. They can be stretched by it. They can be brought to moments of genuine anguish by it. But they cannot be finally, permanently broken by it, because underneath the pain is a foundation of meaning that holds when everything else is shaking. And it is that foundation, the unshakable, knowing that the suffering was never random, never pointless, never evidence of abandonment, that is the chosen one's greatest source of resilience in the wilderness, and their greatest source of authority in the territory that follows it. Because the authority that you are about to walk in is not the authority of someone who has had it easy. It is not the authority of someone who received their assignment without the preparation that makes the assignment sustainable. It is the authority of someone who has been in the fire and not been consumed, who has been in the wilderness and not been lost, who has carried a name given by pain and yet lived in a way that heaven called more honorable, who has prayed in the gap between the promise and the proof and kept praying even when the gap felt wider than faith could reasonably be expected to span. That authority speaks to places and people that comfortable authority cannot reach. It reaches the person who is currently in their own fire, the person who is currently carrying their own name given by pain, the person who is sitting in their own wilderness wondering whether the God who made them has any awareness of the specific coordinates of their suffering. Your story, the full version of it, including the chapters that felt most like failure, is going to reach those people in a way that no amount of polished, painless testimony ever could. Because they will hear in your voice the particular resonance of someone who has been exactly where they are. And that resonance is not something that can be performed or simulated. It is earned. It is earned in the wilderness nights and the unanswered questions and the moments of genuine doubt that were survived not through the absence of doubt, but through the choice to keep moving in faith even while the doubt was present. You have earned that resonance, and the territory that is enlarging is going to be filled with people who desperately need to hear it. This is the full picture of what June 11 is opening. Not just a personal breakthrough, though it is absolutely that. Not just the end of a painful cycle, though it is completely that as well. It is a commissioning, a sending out, a moment when the chosen one who has been in preparation crosses the threshold into deployment, when the one who has been receiving the training becomes the one through whom the training's fruit is distributed to the people who are waiting for what only a thoroughly prepared chosen one can deliver. The territory enlarges not just for your benefit, but for the benefit of everyone whose life is about to intersect with yours in the season that is coming. The blessing flows through you. The authority moves through you. The word that was built in you through the wilderness is released through you into the lives of the people your assignment connects you to. Jabez understood this instinctively, even if he could not have articulated it in the language we are using now. His prayer was not purely self-interested. He asked that God's hand would be with him and that he would be kept from causing pain, which is the prayer of someone who is aware that their life has an impact on others, who understands that the enlarged territory they are asking for is not just a personal acquisition, but a stewardship. He wanted to be held by the hand of God, not merely for his own security, but so that, as he moved through the enlarged territory, his movement would not cause harm to the people he encountered within it. That is the prayer of the chosen one who has been matured by suffering into a genuine awareness of their responsibility to others. That maturity is in you. It was built there by everything you survived, and June 11 is the moment it is released into the world in a way that begins to fulfill the purpose for which it was built. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, carries a promise that has sustained chosen ones through wilderness that this passage cannot fully describe, a promise that was spoken into captivity and exile, and the specific anguish of a people who could not see how the story they were living in was ever going to resolve into something good. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." An expected end. A future and a hope that was built into the design of your story from before the story began. Not a future that might be possible if certain conditions are met. An expected end. One that heaven has been anticipating with the quiet certainty of the one who writes the conclusion before the first chapter is composed. The wilderness was in the plan. The pain was in the plan. The long preparation was in the plan. And the expected end. The territory enlarged, the door opened, the cycle broken, the chosen one deployed into the fullness of their assignment. That was always in the plan too. You are not approaching an uncertain outcome. You are approaching an expected end. One that heaven has been building toward through every chapter of a story that was never as random as it sometimes felt. One that June 11 is now bringing into view with a clarity that the wilderness seasons could not provide, but that the threshold of the promised territory makes suddenly unmistakably visible. The preparation is complete. The promotion is arriving. The expected end is closer than it has ever been. And the chosen one who has endured everything the journey required is standing exactly where heaven always planned for them to stand. At the threshold, ready, qualified, commissioned, and about to step into the fullness of everything that was written over their life before a single day of the wilderness began. You have made it to this moment, not stumbled into it, not arrived here by accident or by the arbitrary drift of an algorithm that happened to place this message in your path at a random time on an unremarkable day. You have been brought here, carried here, through every section of this message, through every truth that landed and every word that found the place inside you that needed finding by the same intentional, precise, deeply personal guidance that has been directing your entire journey from the very beginning. The fact that you are still here, that you did not step away when the message pressed into tender places, that you allowed the full weight of what heaven was releasing to settle into you without deflecting it or intellectualizing it into something safer. That fact alone tells the story of who you are. You are the chosen one who stays, who endures, who receives, who is ready. Everything that has been spoken in this message has been building toward this final threshold. The wake-up call of the first section that named the cost of staying in the cycle. The story of Jabez and the radical audacity of a prayer offered by someone born into pain who refused to let pain write the conclusion of their life. The science of the frequency that chosen ones carry, the theta-gamma signature of a mind built for breakthrough, and the practical pathway through which that frequency can be restored after seasons of suffering have suppressed it. The bridge back into spiritual truth that reminded you the outer tool is only as powerful as the inner readiness of the vessel that uses it. The reframing of June as a portal rather than a prison, a training ground rather than a permanent address. The practical invitation to stay connected, to share the word, to support the ministry, to remain in the flow of what heaven is releasing through this channel. The revelation that heaven has been watching every moment you thought you were unseen. The declaration of the open door and the community of chosen ones whose voices joined yours in announcing that the threshold has been crossed. The commissioning of the 9th section that named you not just as a recipient of breakthrough, but as a carrier of it, a vessel through which the fruit of your preparation flows into the lives of the people your assignment is about to connect you to. All of it was preparation for this, for the final word, for the moment when the message does not just inform the chosen one, but sends them. When the word spoken over their life is not merely received, but activated. When the chosen one who came into this message, still partially defined by the name that pain gave them, leaves it inhabiting the name that heaven wrote over them before the pain arrived. That is what this moment is. A sending, a commissioning, a release into the fullness of what June 11 has been holding in trust for the chosen one who endured long enough to arrive at its threshold. And you are here. You arrive. Through the wilderness and the cycles and the nights and the unanswered questions and the weight that tried to convince you that the journey had no destination worth the cost of the travel. You arrived anyway, because that is who you are. That is who you have always been. The one who arrives, the one who endures, the one who, like Jabez, refuses to be finally defined by the circumstances of the beginning and keeps reaching, keeps praying, keeps believing until the God who made them grants that which they requested. And now, before this message releases you into the season that is opening, there is one more thing that needs to happen. Not a theological exercise, not a performance for an audience, a genuine, honest, present-moment conversation between the chosen one and the God who has been listening to every conversation of their entire life. A prayer, not a formula, not a recitation of words that sound appropriately spiritual, but carry no actual weight of personal meaning. The real thing, offered from exactly where you are, with everything you are carrying, in the full honesty of a spirit that has been through something and knows that the one it is addressing knows the full story without needing it summarized. So, wherever you are right now, whatever posture your body is in, let something in you become still. Not the performed stillness of someone trying to create the right atmosphere for a spiritual experience. The genuine settling of a spirit that has heard the word and is now ready to respond to the one who sent it. And if these words capture something of what your heart is reaching toward, let them be yours. Father, I come to you not with a polished version of myself, but with the real one. The one who has been through the seasons that only you and I know the full weight of. The one who has carried names that were never mine to carry, and endured nights that were longer than I knew how to navigate, and arrived at mornings that required more faith than I felt I actually possessed. You know all of it. You have known it from before I did. And I want to thank you, not for the pain, but for the purpose inside it. Not for the wilderness, but for what the wilderness built in me that nothing else could have produced. I thank you that you kept a record when I thought no one was watching. I thank you that my tears were never lost. I thank you that the name written over my life in your handwriting was never overwritten by the name that my circumstances tried to give me. Today I stand at the threshold of June 11 with my door open. I am not standing outside the promise anymore. I am inside it. I receive the enlarged territory. I receive the answered prayer. I receive the end of the cycle that has been repeating. I receive the commissioning into the assignment that the preparation was always building me toward. I ask that your hand be with me, the way it was with Jabez, not just for my own security, but so that as I move through the territory, that is, enlarging my movement brings life to the people whose lives I am about to touch. Keep me from causing harm. Keep me walking in the honor that you noted over my life, even in the seasons when I could barely feel it in myself. And let the frequency you placed in me, the one that researchers call gamma and that scripture calls anointing, and that I have felt my entire life as the sense that I was made, For more than the circumstances of my beginning suggested, let that frequency flow freely now, unobstructed, fully expressed, in alignment with the assignment that was written before I arrived. I receive it, all of it completely, without apology and without shrinking, because you did not make me to be small. You made me to carry something, and I am ready to carry it. In the name that is above every name that pain has ever tried to give me. Amen. Beloved, chosen one, that prayer was not empty words released into an indifferent universe. It was the sound of a chosen one, whose preparation is complete, arriving at the threshold that was always prepared for them. And heaven heard it with the same attentiveness that it brought to the prayer of Jabez on the day that everything changed for a man who was born into pain and refused to be buried by it. June 11 is not just a date. It is the answer to every prayer you have offered in the gap between the promise and the proof. It is the graduation from the wilderness into the territory. It is the moment the sunrise breaks on the horizon of a life that was always going to arrive here. Because the God who wrote the conclusion before the first chapter was composed does not write stories that end in the wilderness. He writes stories that end in the promised land. And the promised land has your name on it, written in the handwriting of heaven, preserved through every chapter that tried to convince you the journey had no worthy destination. You are the chosen one. You always were. And everything that tried to make you forget that was working against a truth so deeply embedded in who you are that it could be pressed but never permanently erased. It is still there. It has always been there. And June 11 is the day it becomes undeniable, not just to you, but to everyone whose life your life is about to touch. Go forward, not tentatively, not with one foot still in the familiar. With the full, unashamed, heaven-backed confidence of a chosen one who has heard the word, received the word, declared the word, prayed the word, and is now being sent by the word into the fullness of the assignment that the preparation was always building toward. If this message has done something real in your spirit today, if it has touched a place that needed to be touched or named, something that needed to be named, or opened a door that had been closed for longer than it should have been, then do something with that. Share this message with someone who is still in their wilderness, someone whose face came to mind as you moved through these sections, someone who needs to know that the pain was never the final word, and that June 11 holds something for them too. Like this video as an act of faith, a declaration that the word released here is worth sending further into the world. Subscribe so that what heaven continues to release through this channel reaches you the moment it is made available, because the word that is coming next is already being prepared for the season you are walking into. And if this ministry has been a source of genuine nourishment for your journey, if these messages have reached you in moments when you needed to be reached and delivered something that sustained you through seasons that required sustaining, the link to support this work is in the description and in the pinned comment below. Every contribution is received as a seed sown into ground that has already proven its capacity to produce fruit in the lives of the chosen ones who encounter it. You came into this message one person. You are leaving it another. Not because the words were impressive, but because the God who sent them is faithful, and the chosen one who received them is ready. The door is open. The territory is enlarged. The sunrise has broken. And June 11 is waiting to confirm everything that heaven has already declared. Go, you are sent.